Hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. I am excited for another edition of our Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. Today, we're going to be talking about failing to plan is planning to fail, our year-end planning edition. So that's our theme this month. I'm going to give it a few minutes for others to join us before we get started. If you're tuning in, go ahead and drop something in the chat box so that we know that you are here. And we're going to get started shortly. All right. Go ahead, and if you're tuning in, go ahead and invite some of your friends. If they're not in the Facebook group, invite them to the Facebook group and tag them in the chat box so that they can tune in this live. The goal of today's live is to kick off this month's theme of year-end planning. So you definitely don't want to miss it. I know a lot of you are following our theme. So last month we just concluded evaluation and monitoring. And this month, we're going to start talking about year-end planning, as a lot of nonprofit organizations are preparing to conclude their fiscal year on June 30th. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you should consider and be doing around this time. So today is just a kickoff of the year-end planning conversation. We do have some guests and some exciting conversations that's going to be happening this month on the live. So please just go ahead, invite your friends. If you're catching this on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat box, and we're going to get started shortly. Hey, Sarah, good morning. And if you are here tuning in, go ahead and say how you doing this morning in the chat box. Good morning, Jennifer. Good to see you. You have an event coming up this weekend, Jennifer. If you get a chance, drop that in the chat box. The link or any information where others can learn more about your event that's coming up this weekend. Hey, Keyshawn, how are you? Hope you're doing well. All right, everyone. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Hey, Sarah. All right, so thank you all so much for tuning in this morning. And the goal of this morning's conversation is to kick off this month's conversation on year-end planning. So once again, if you have any friends that you feel should be in this conversation, go ahead and tag them in the chat box. If you're catching this on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat box. And if you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So some nonprofit organizations are getting ready to close out their fiscal year on June 30th. And for others, yours may not be until later on this year. It might not be until December, maybe. But that's okay, because the reason we wanted to have this conversation early in the year is so that we can start thinking about what does the year-end planning look like. One of my favorite quotes is failing to plan is planning to fail. So you'll notice a lot, we always talk about having a plan in place. And I just believe once you have plans in place, are things going to happen? Yes, but at least it won't be, you kind of have the things that you could have pre-planned taken care of. So this month we're going to have quite a few guests. I believe probably every Thursday after this, we're going to have a guest coming on talking about some of the tips and tricks and best practices for year planning. Some of the conversation is going to be focused. We do have a guest coming on talking in the area of fundraising and what fundraisers are doing around this in your organization as a whole in the fundraising realm. Should consider doing it around this time of the year. But one of the biggest things from today's call I want you all to start thinking about is, what does year-end planning look like for your organization? And I really would this month really take the time to map that out. this is the best time to map it out, especially for those organizations that conclude their fiscal year in December. So one of the things is you might be asking yourself, who should be doing year-end planning? And I would tell you that your entire organization should be involved in year-end planning. So that means that goes from your board, your marketing team, your program team, your operations team. And then some of the things that all of these divisions should be looking at that they have in common is looking at the data from the year before. You know, like, how did we perform last year in the marketing space? What was our efforts effective? And using that data and that information, and I'm not going to talk too much about data because we spent a whole month last month talking about evaluation. But one of the things is that you want to be able to use that data and kind of project where are you going to go from here, planning ahead for the upcoming year. Okay. Another thing that all of your divisions can be working on is budgeting, looking at the budget. How did we do last year? Were we on target? Where we spent our funds? What is that the best place? Did we see a return on investment for the areas that we spent our funds? Maybe we need to change things around, and then starting to look at forecast the budget for the upcoming year. So those are some of the things that across all of your divisions can be done. And of course, in the board space, you all will really be focusing on the overall organization, but everyone should be involved in the year-end planning. And that's something that we're going to be talking about throughout this month. That is not just the board's responsibility. It's not just one division's responsibility, but every portion of your nonprofit should have a plan for what the year-end looks like. And as an executive director, you're probably, or unless you have like a chief financial officer, you may be spending a lot of time in the budgets and creating the budgets for the upcoming year. But the whole goal is have a plan in place. Don't just, because a lot of times I know, especially around with some organizations concluding their fiscal year in December, I get that question of what should I be doing? Like, you should be doing something. So the goal of this conversation, let's start thinking about what those things are, mapping them out so that you can start planning towards what's to come for your organization. So today, one of the areas that I also wanted to zoom in on, it was board, what the board is doing. So oftentimes upon the conclusion of year end, boards are getting ready to do their annual meeting. So one of the things is I want to talk about 5 areas that you should consider placing on your board's agenda. So one thing that may happen around this time is you might start electing new board members and officers. So definitely take a look at your bylaws. Again, don't wait until the end of the year. You could start looking at that now. What does this look like? So that you can start preparing. And some boards do, and it is good to start preparing as to if someone term has ended, what does this look like as far as who's going to be our next chair? You all do want to start having that conversation early so that you can start planning what that can look like. And let me take a moment, just look in the chat and see how we are doing. All right. All right. Okay, so, all right, so another thing that you want to do during your annual board meeting agenda is provide an update on your organization's health to the board. And this is really a lot of annual meetings. I know they go longer than a typical board meeting just because you're really diving into where are we going. And when you host your annual meetings, if you have any tips or tricks that you use, go ahead and drop that in the chat box that you found work. I know some organization, even though typically some may wait until after the conclusion of the year to have their annual meeting, there's some that start that conversation beforehand and then also do it afterwards as well. So if you have any best practices that you use for when you're hosting your annual board meetings or any topics that you make sure that you cover to help determine the next direction for your organization, go ahead and drop that in the chat box to share with others. Something else that is happening oftentimes that you might want to include on your meeting agenda is approve your budget and review your financial statements for the upcoming year. And I know I talk about this often, is making sure you know your numbers. I shared with you all, I have what I call Finance Fridays. And I know that I'm just like that. I have Marketing Mondays and Finance Fridays. Finance Fridays is where I'm diving into the numbers of the organization, seeing how we're doing, what we need to change, having those conversations, setting goals, letting the teams know, hey, you know, when we host this fundraiser, this is our goal for that fundraiser, or, you know, for that upcoming program, this is where, you know, making sure that we stay on target. I try to really know our budget, and that also helps us, and then also having those, it starts the conversation in a sense of, is what we're doing, is it working? Because sometimes you're going to find that you may have paid for or invested in this and it's not bringing as much ROI. Is it something that, hey, let's give it one more go around, or maybe this year we need to kind of pull back on that? So it helps you have that strategic conversation. So as your executive director, you should, whether you have a chief financial officer or not, or whether you have an accountant or not, you should always know your budget, know your numbers. And the other thing about this, it's helpful when you know your numbers, because you know your needs. So you never know when you're out and about, someone may say, hey, how can we help? And you could say, well, you know what, because you know your numbers and it's fresh in your head, you know, we've been wanting to do this. We're just looking for someone to pay for the supplies for this upcoming event. We have all of this. It helps you have that type of conversation. Something else that you may be covering in your annual board meeting is your review of your policies and procedures. And that's a great time to serve as a refresher on any of the policies and procedures that you all may have. You might go over your conflict of interest policy again and remind the board about that. Some boards have a signing of the policies and procedures done again every year, and that's something that you all could consider doing. So it's a good time to do a refresher to remind the board of the different policies and procedures. And then also one thing, and I'll say not only for your annual board meeting agenda, set your 12-month board meeting. Like when are we meeting for the next 12 months? Go ahead and just do it then. And this is actually on all your teams. I would say try to really dive into what does the next year look like for us? When are we meeting? What are some areas that we're covering? What are our target, you know, like your board might say, hey, we're gonna have our meetings for the next 12 months. If your bylaws say quarterly, you might say quarterly. So you have your quarterly meetings, but in each of these meetings, our goals are this. You know, we looked at our strategic plan. We said we really want to do this year. We would like this to be on our agenda. You can start pulling together what those agenda looks like 12 months in advance, and that helps make sure that everyone is on the same page. So definitely that's the 5 areas I would say to consider, and there are plenty more you can include when building your annual board meeting agenda. So electing new board members and or officers based on your bylaws, providing an update on your organizational health, approving your budget and reviewing financials, a review of your policy and procedures, and then determining your calendar of meetings and initiatives for the next 12 months. Okay. All right. So homework. So if you have not done so, make sure that you check out, and we dropped it in the chat box, register for next month's free webinar on May 24th at 7 p.m. We're going to be talking about fund development. You definitely don't want to miss that conversation. If you have not joined in on the conversation before, please make sure that you register for that. And then also your other homework is start preparing for your year end now. So what does the year end look like for your organization? And another reason why I say do it now, because we know once October, November, once we turn that corner for October, November, December, it moves really fast. And a lot of times our focus is shifted, not necessarily on the operations and year end planning components. We're more like, okay, let's get that last minute, not the last, the last run of fundraising in. And that's normally where a lot of organizations focus their efforts. So if we start now thinking about our year-end plan, that would help us not miss these other important aspects of our organization. All right. Good morning, Anne-Marie. Thank you for tuning in. So as I mentioned, the whole goal of today's call is just to kick off our year-end planning conversation. As I mentioned before, if your organization, because starting a nonprofit, growing a nonprofit, there's a lot of components to it, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So as I recommend this before, follow our themes. If you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, just go ahead. Okay, so this month, my goal, one of my main goals this month is year-end planning. I'm going to focus on what the end of the year looks like for our organization. So that's one way we try to make it easier for you all. Follow our themes. And the good thing is, as you kind of tune in, you'll be able to kind of hear some information that can help you along that process. And then if you have questions, you could drop it in the chat box as you go. So definitely follow our themes. Check out our guide section. If you are new to viewing our Nonprofit Enthusiast Live, in the Facebook group, we have a guide area. If you just click on that, you'll see some of our past conversations grouped by the themes of the month. So you can always go back and check that out. All right, so we have an exciting month planned for you all. Please continue to tune in. We'll be back next Thursday with the guests. We'll be announcing the guests and details in the group early next week. And other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. All right, bye everyone.